Hello, I am Ryan from The Way of the Leaf, and we welcome you to our show, WoT You Feeling. This show is designed as a thoughtful and engaging exploration into the mental and emotional health aspects of the world of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. We hope to create an open discussion about mental health, the role of society, and how these can be viewed through a lens of empathy and support. Joining us as always is Miki and Christine, and our guest host for our first show is the Wise One Shelly. Guys, how are you all doing?
Good, how are you?
Great, thank you.
I'm super excited.
Yeah.
All right, and so yeah, let's remind everybody what we're all about. We are fans of the show. We are fans of the series, but we also have like peculiar life experiences and specific expertise. Let's tell everybody why we are here and what we're doing.
Sure, yeah. I think that this is such a neat idea. This came up a few months ago when we got to chat with each other on the Dusty Wheel, and we thought, wow, we all have kind of have worked in the psych field, know the psych field, but then also are big fans of the books. And so we thought, well, this is a cool topic. Let's keep doing this. And so that little seed built and grew into what we've got going today, at least for this first episode.
WoT You Feeling. Christine?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Miki said. I think we all just sort of came together on the Dusty Wheel and found that we had a really great rapport naturally between the three of us, and sort of wanted to explore that a little bit more and build on it and see what else we could talk about within this series that we all love so much, and especially through the lens of mental health, which we all love very much too. So I think it's people bring up mental health all the time in relation to the Wheel of Time without really having a background in mental health. So I feel like for the three of us having backgrounds in mental health, we have a unique perspective and one that we can offer to other people who are looking to learn more.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what our backgrounds are, it's in the description of the video. But Shelly, thank you so much for being our guest host.
No worries. So I can start doing a little more moderating now if you like.
Please.
And honestly, I'm not sure why I'm here today, but I'm very flattered to be. I think it's... we can explain that a little bit more too, because as we started talking about this, we realized, that we could probably geek out about this stuff quite a bit, but sometimes it's nice having an outside perspective that comes in, right? Especially if the three of us kind of share language in the field of mental health. We don't want to geek out and go down a rabbit hole that is just about the three of us and what we're interested in. And so it's really nice having sort of an outside perspective to ask questions and to maybe probe questions that we might just be working off assumptions and that isn't as clear to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm happy to do so. And I believe we're kind of focusing on the first 4 chapters of the Wheel of Time today. Are we including the prologue in that, or?
If you want.
Yeah.
Good call.
Some of it might come in, but the first topic I wanted to ask you guys about, I was recently talking to someone about, actually I think it was one of the Discords that Miki, you and Christine and I are in. I was talking about how I hate romantic comedies. And one of the reasons I actually really despise them is because so many of the problems could be solved with just a really good conversation.
Yeah.
I want to do this thing. I feel weird about you doing that thing because we have parenting responsibilities. Let's work out a compromise. Movie over. And it drives me bonkers. It keeps me away from rom-coms. But this is a major driver of conflict in the Wheel of Time. What is it about the conflict in the Wheel of Time that comes from that poor communication? What do you think Robert Jordan's trying to get at with that? And why do I keep going back to it when it drives me bonkers in so many other mediums?
Oh, I have some great thoughts on this. I think, or at least the thing that I'm thinking of first, right, is the thing that I love about Robert Jordan's writing is this unreliable narrator. But he writes he writes the book so that we're seeing through the eyes of our characters. I mean, early on, we're only seeing through Rand's eyes, right? But throughout the series, we see through other characters' eyes. And so it's so very real and human because there's things they're thinking and experiencing that maybe if they had more information, like say if they communicated with other people, that might change their way of thinking or seeing things. But you can kind of see how people get caught up in their own assumptions or kind of just like get caught in their own thoughts. I'm thinking like that very first chapter, like the lonely road, right? And Rand sees the Dark Rider, and should he tell his dad or not? Is he gonna believe him? Is he not gonna believe him? And and so like, but that feels really human, that piece. And I think in a way maybe the rom-coms don't always feel quite so like, they don't quite get it. I'm curious, what do you guys think about it?
I think, yes. Yes. I like the way that you brought that up. I think it's very true. And I think, one thing with rom-coms is they tend to have main characters who are usually like mid-30s or so. So these are fully formed adults who you sort of have an expectation that maybe they could communicate like adults communicate. And it's really disappointing when they don't about the most simple things. Whereas, with the Emond's Field kids, there's kids, like developmentally, they're still teenagers for the most part, and they're very self-centered and very self-focused. And so most of what they think about and worry about is in relation to how they are going to be viewed by their peers or by their parents or other elders. They're not really thinking about much outside of their own personal feelings. So that also makes it more relatable, and I think a little bit more forgivable early on.
There are a lot of like plot implications though for like when they don't talk to each other. Like very early on, like I believe Tam believed Rand. I think Tam felt that there was someone following them. I think a lot of things happened after that, but he never gave that understanding to Rand. Maybe he didn't want Rand to be stressed out. But like when the Trolloc burst down the door and Tam had already got his sword ready, do you think Rand might have benefited from being on guard? Maybe a little like all he had was like a hot teapot. That's all he had. If Tam was like, hey, you know what, I believe you and we should be ready, maybe that would have worked out way different. I don't know. And very early on, you see when no one is able to really express truth to each other, plot develops around that. And I used to call it the Three's Company thing where right no one's talked to each other in Three's Company, and that every episode is some sort of weird communication misunderstanding. But I think that you see this throughout, and it really affects how people are able to deal with what they're handling, because they don't actually feel that they can express their truth to each other. They can't express what the worst thing that happened to each other. Let's remind everyone, this is a full spoiler show. Okay, so we're going to talk about the entire series. So if you've not read the entire series, please do not watch this show. Come back for some other non-spoiler shit that we put out on The Way the Leaf. But this is I'm going to talk about things further. So even in the accepted test, none of our main protagonists can tell each other what they went through in their own accepted tests, right? I just was going through this in my reread. Nynaeve and Elaine and Egwene, they cannot even tell each other what they experience. They will just sit there and cry in each other's lap, but they won't let it out. I think that's very fascinating how Robert Jordan chooses to make people the worst communicators in the world.
Well, do you think that there's the way, even if you look at Emond's Field, there's a women's circle and there's women's circle business. And there's the mayoral council, the town council. I can't remember what it's called. But do you think that the structures of the societies way they're set up are inhibiting that communication? And if so, how do you think that those structures are kind of contributing to that?
I think that's a really good question.
Yeah, it is a really good question.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it comes back to something I've been thinking about too, about something that's been hinted at after seeing the trailer for the show. And people have been asking, like, oh, how much is the world in this impacted by just the way the Aes Sedai run things? We see it with kind of the hinting at the colors that are coming through and stuff. And one of the other patterns that I see in the communication is it seems like there is the expression of uncertainty is maybe not intentionally like dismissed, but a lot of people don't speak with uncertainty. You know, when we see people expressing something, they're saying something is this way. And I'm thinking about, Ryan, what you were saying with Tam, like if Tam had come back and been able to say, hey, I believe you, son. I'm not sure what that means, but you know, we will, you know, we'll see what happens tonight. It might be nothing, it might be something, but we could be. Let's be extra prepared tonight. There's some uncertainty in that, and I don't hear anybody in the series really talking like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good
Anyone
point.
else have anything to add to that?
No, that's a great point. Like when you're trying to like suss out like what is real, especially when you're dealing with, like with POVs that are shifting and like limited. When you have, I remember when I first read the books, I just kind of took everything at face value. I didn't think that I didn't go into the nuances of how he was writing it. I read different things out of it, but I definitely took things for face value. But
yeah, I think I'm just thinking, like I'm trying to think about that question. I might have a better answer later. I'm still working on it right now.
That's all right.
I was going to add one more piece too, because I started by connecting it to the Aes Sedai, right? And I don't know that there's any example of any Aes Sedai in there. And people can correct me if I'm wrong, because there's a lot of Aes Sedai and a lot of dialogue. But I can't think of many of them that express uncertainty. Mm-hmm. You know, the way that Aes Sedai speak is they tell you how it is, and they speak in absolutes. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if that just kind of bleeds through the communication in the world in general.
What do you think characters are thinking the consequences would be if they expressed uncertainty? Like what is leading to that need to feel like, oh, I have to sound like I know what I'm doing in this situation?
Yeah, it feels like it's insecure, like they're insecure in their like roles or how they feel they need to be presenting themselves. A lot of times our protagonists feel like they are thrust in their leadership roles, and they, oh my god, they almost feel like they need to like parrot or puppet what someone who is in leadership would do. And I think that yeah, so like they don't. It's almost like if you don't embody the role appropriately, everyone will see through you. It's almost like you'll be diminished in some way, maybe weaker or seen as a fraud.
Mm-hmm. I think we see that a lot with Nynaeve early on, mm-hmm. in the way that she is
good point
behaving as the wisdom of Emond's field, right? She's so heavy-handed and she is so like my way or the highway, or basically my way or I'm going to hit you with a stick that I carry around. And I think you're right. I think in part that comes from a deeply rooted insecurity that she has about not being taken seriously, because she is very young to be a wisdom, and she is a woman who is not imposing physically. You know, I think she's had to put on this strong face for a really, really long time. She's always had a lot of responsibility on her shoulders, and she sort of overcompensates a little bit in her role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hence the violence.
Hence the violence.
Hence the walking around with us. Oh no!
Are you committing violence to your camera?
He is.
Goodness gracious! All right,
just have a conversation with it.
Tell your camera what you need. We're going to use our words today.
How are you feeling?
Keep it together.
But I mean, Christine, you fed me a transition there, because I know what we wanted to talk about too was about the physical violence, and it's interesting because poor communication often causes the problems, but physical violence is often used as a solution to the problems.
Yes.
And, what do you think Robert Jordan's intent was with that, that it's almost a dichotomy almost. It's, the solutions never match the actual issues.
No, but something like violence can be a very effective way to end an uncomfortable conversation. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to have to think too deeply about something that's bothering you and you can react in a violent way, then a lot of times that will sort of sideline the person.
Okay. The outcome, the function is, it serves a powerful function, but yeah, for sure. But we're not like advocating violence.
No, we're not advocating violence, but I think that you can see from a cultural standpoint how there are, in some instances, what I would call culturally acceptable types of violence, right? Or levels of physical violence. It doesn't mean that it's okay. I'm not condoning it. I just think that as a culture and as a society, there are certain types of violence that we accept and that sometimes we even promote. We see it in entertainment all the time. We see it in books. We see it in family systems. It wasn't too long ago that people were almost expected to spank their children, or even in schools where, people in leadership roles were allowed to hit your children if they misbehaved, and that was accepted and it was even promoted in some cases. So now we know that it's more productive to have a conversation, to discuss things that are uncomfortable, find out, the root of the problem behavior and work through it that way. And so I think if you have a situation where, let's say a child or a young adult comes to you and they want to talk to you about something that makes you very uncomfortable, it's a lot easier to shut them down than it is to delve into something that then makes you uncomfortable and makes it seem like you don't know what you're talking about, which then kind of brings us back to the whole always pretending like you know what your role is and you are not uncertain about anything ever.
Absolutely. Good point.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, that was a rambling way.
I loved it.
What I was thinking.
No, it's okay. And it's interesting that you bring up family systems because at least at this point in the book, we'll save the Saldean conversation for later show for you guys. But at least at this point in the book, it doesn't seem like violence is part of child rearing necessarily. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't come up that much. It comes up, except for, I guess, we see it in the Copplers and the Congars. We see some intimate partner violence in there. I want to talk to you guys. How do you feel about the fact that sometimes Robert Jordan seems to play this for comedy? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, Ewan Fingar is a child who's just getting repeatedly attacked, and it's supposed to feel that's funny. I never thought of it as for comedy. But yeah. Oh, what do I think about that? Well, I mean, in terms of the level of violence that Robert Jordan experienced in his life, and that he's going to bring the story to. How do you, if you compare to Do My Wells, how do you how do you express taking a swing at Ewan Fingar, from Sen Bui, who's not even related to him. He's not related to that kid. He's just a random old dude just trying to hit some random kid. If that happened in front of me at the grocery store, I'd be like, what the fuck? I would you what? You just trying to hit some random kid? Ewan's fast, rolls out of the way. I guess he's used to it. Matt threatens him, and then Sen Bui tries to hit him. Yeah. So as in terms of Robert Jordan's mentality, I can see how he can almost make it a comedic 80s sitcom type thing. Mm-hmm. But if we were to try and get into Ewan Fingar's mind, what's he going to be like? How is he going to raise his kids? Mm-hmm. What is he going to is he just going to is he going to be a good, human being, as an adult? He's just routinely trying to tell the truth and people are like, what the fuck? Psh, smacking him down. I don't know. So yeah, there's casual violence in Emmonsfield all over the place. Mm-hmm. So, but to the comedy, the point though, yeah, I think it's almost degrees. because it gets really worse, way worse.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. It's a degree thing. Like there is the violence that's for comedy, right? Like the spanking that comes up throughout the books, or the threats of spanking. But then that's paired against the violence that is really, really violent, but isn't explicitly described, but like the violence of a Trolloc attack, or what the Trollocs do to people. I mean, just even some of the battles, you mentioned Dumais Well, right? Like that's kind of like the standout piece there. But even going back to the accepted tests, like the violence that's there is so strong. And so like, I wonder, I don't think that it was intentional. I mean, I think to me, it kind of speaks a little bit to like growing up watching the Three Stooges, and some of that Ewan Fingar violence, I think is maybe written like that Three Stooges violence, which we might see from a different lens, in 2021 than we would have in 1991. I know I do. I mean, like, I think I definitely have a different look at the violence in the books now than I did when I first read them.
I do too. I sort of think of it this way. Growing up, we're all of pretty much the same generation. John Hughes movies were a big thing growing up. All of those John Hughes movies, right? And when I think about how people are treated in those movies for comedic effect, like in 16 Candles and in Uncle Buck, where he's throwing this teenager in the trunk of his car and threatening him with a hatchet. I mean, like stuff like that would totally not fly today. Shoving kids in lockers, all of that kind of stuff. But at the time, that was something that socially we found funny to watch on screen. And now reading it as an adult, and particularly an adult with a background in mental health, we see it differently, right? We see it as something that could potentially be harmful to the individual. And I wonder if that's part of where Robert Jordan was coming from when he wrote these books, because even though they were published, he started publishing in 1991, he started writing them before that. And so I think to some degree he was influenced by what was socially acceptable.
I think that's fair. I never seen The Breakfast Club, and then I watched it on a plane, I think like 4 years ago, and I had to message my friends and be like, sorry, I'm not seeing what you guys like about this movie. Like there were a lot of things that now that I'm older, I'm like, ooh, that's an issue. So, yeah, I can see how those things change. One thing I did want to go back to in terms of the violence as well is, and I know I'm throwing you guys some
we love it.
Some curveballs that you weren't
We live for this shit. Are you kidding?
Yeah. So the Coplans and the Congars, I keep saying Congars. I mentioned it, but I'd like to hear more about it. There is that relationship between, I think, Days Congar and her husband, where she is quite, and there's that cuckolding. But I also the Congars in general are kind of, they have a reputation in the Two Rivers. Do you think intergenerational trauma could be playing into that?
I'm so glad you brought this up.
You're Ryan's hero, Shelly.
I gotta be someone's.
There's so many aspects of like community psychology, and like how we the individual is framed by their world, and how they will either rise or fall to the expectations of the broader group. So yeah, like we don't know that the origins of the Coplans and the Congar mystique or like whatever, like lore, but they're all seen as being like weird and like hard to, and like dumb, like very, very basically dumb. And there's a very distinct passage in Eye of the World where Tom Maryland is talking about seeing a group of people arriving in carts, and there's like violence and everything has happened, but these people are not even aware of what has just happened, and they're just walking up trying to get like a meal or something. Like I don't remember exactly what they're doing, but Tom is like, wow, like they seem like touched in some way, like they're almost like disabled, and so I don't know. Is it that they're just like framed and they're just behaving that way, or are they actually like literally just inbred and like creating like a lesser form of human being? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I never thought about it.
I mean, I think that's the thing with
generational
violence, though, right? Like it becomes a chicken or egg thing, right? Yeah. You know, we know that trauma affects or especially early childhood trauma affects brain development. It affects how people respond to stimuli. They can become hypersensitive to stimuli, or the opposite can kind of become hyposensitive, where they're just not taking in information because there's just too much information in the world when you've experienced the world from a traumatic lens. And so it would make sense that if you had that generation after generation after generation, you might not notice everything that's going on in the world around you, which then others would see you as lesser or stupid or whatever. And then that would impact how people treat you and your family, which would increase the pressure that your family's experiencing. And then, you know, they experience increased pressure, and then they let it out on their kids, and it just cycles all over again.
Mm-hmm. Now let's bring it back to the world of nerddom. This could possibly be the Dark One's tank. I think it was Billy Conger had said the Dark One's name, and there was some sort of like worm disease in the crops, and then they all got like dysentery or something. Well, we don't know. Maybe it was just like their whole entire family just got effed because Billy Conger was like, oh, Shaitan. Hey, we don't know. We don't know. Just both are true.
Yeah, it's well, we'll know based on how your life goes from this point forward, because you just named the Dark One. So I think that's a good experiment.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
no! Right. I think I'm good.
See, you said the Dark One's name. This is what happens.
Mm-hmm. I'm taking that as evidence.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you guys invited me on, because I have a psych degree, but it's from like a statistics background. Like I'm very much into the statistical and measurement part of psychology. So I think we just ran an experiment there.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Did we? Are you sure?
With an N of
one. Of this experiment?
Yeah.
N of one.
You know, I often call myself the bell curve. I mean, but yeah.
I wanted to say one more thing about violence, and not necessarily the generational piece, but like I find it interesting in those first 4 chapters, how kind of nonchalant people are about what a bad winter it is, because they're saying these bears and wolves are killing sheep and people. And I mean, I think this goes back to, was it Matt Steiger that said earlier, like that they lived in a feudal world and that it, violence is a thing. But even that kind of struck me as like, so people are getting eaten, and we're just like, yeah, that was a bad winter, man. Too bad.
Yeah.
Although I don't think it was bears and wolves, but.
Well, do you want to talk about that? Because I know you guys will understand the effect that has on your amygdala over time and your nervous system. Like, what does that kind of continued stress do to a body that we might see play out in the Wheel of Time?
Great question, Shelly. Well, yellowing of the eyes is really an issue. That's a pure sign.
Heightened sense of smell.
Yeah. Hearing.
Night vision.
Hearing voices.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think certain things that you cannot look to the text for that, because I think Robert Jordan's like, these are the flaws in his writing. Like, our characters are experiencing some of the craziest shit you've ever seen, and they just go on. And they don't sit around. You don't even have like campfire scenes where they're sitting around talking about it. They're not like, oh my god, wasn't that fucking crazy when the Green Man and the Forsaken, like that whole scene happened, and then they never sit around like they don't even process. You don't see any of that. So I always think of that as more like a kind of a, either as a writer you just need to move the story forward, and he just can, he knew how much he could really get into, or it's just like he himself cannot do it because he's already experienced so much trauma in his life that it's natural for him to just move on and progress in his life. So maybe we're seeing how he has just kind of like dealt with his extreme situations that he's lived through that we have not, as people who have not experienced war. So I don't know how to like assess it. I think it's just like we're either seeing through his mindset, or he's just like trying to like, as a writer, just fucking let's go. We got to get to the end of the book. I don't know. But it's always felt like a flaw in some way.
I'm looking at chat, and I just have to like give a shout out to Kev's response, which is that that you develop gambling addictions or savior complex or obsessive codependence. So, but I think also to your point, Shelly, like what effect does it have on the brain if we're in a world where violence is frequent and real, and threats are out there, and I think it can be argued two ways. And I think that's one of the things that's amazing about the books, because Robert Jordan is writing from a lived perspective of experiencing violence, right? So I think that's one of the reasons why it reads so true in certain ways, because some of the things that I think some people read as like, oh, that wouldn't happen, you wouldn't just walk off and not say anything, is actually that is a trauma response, right? Mm-hmm. There comes a point where, you dissociate from the trauma and you detach and you're not talking about it again. And so that is a pretty common response. But then the other thing that can happen is that the trauma that they're experiencing, when we talk about the big traumas, and I think that's why it was really interesting that you brought up earlier, this idea of kind of these, like the lighthearted violence versus the life and death violence they experience, is that a lot of the characters in these books are experiencing true life and death violence and trauma, and we are designed to attend to that and fight that better than if I think people we can respond to things in our world nowadays as if it is a life and death threat that maybe it really isn't. Like I've got this big report at work that I got to get in, and your amygdala is responding to it as if it is a bear coming at you. But when it is an actual bear, then that fight, flight, or freeze response kicks in, and it does what it's designed to do. You fight the bear, you run away from it, or you freeze and hope that it doesn't see you, and then you shake it off and go on. And I don't say that lightly. I don't mean that lightly. I mean, like, somatically, that's what we're designed to do, is literally like physically shake and move when we have a traumatic response like that.
Well, actually, to that point, and I was going to bring this point up also, Kev says that the Two Rivers folk are repeatedly said to get to work and start over. They are a community that is familiar with trauma and hardship. And I distinctly remember someone saying that, well, the will weaves as the will wills, and if the will doesn't will, well, then we'll just carry on anyways. Someone says, like, one of the Two Rivers folks, I don't remember exactly who, tell me in chat, says something that, like, if we were going to get into all of these situations, like, there's that phrase encapsulates the Manetheren like bloodline or whatever, which is, what does the Manetheren bloodline mean? Is that just like shared like trauma, like where you just kind of like pass it down, like how to like harden yourself over and over again? But they definitely, like, we see cultures that will never deviate with the will wills, and they're just trying to follow that, and then we have the Two Rivers folk who are just like, well, if the wheel's not going to give us crops, we'll figure that shit out anyways, because they're just like, it's interesting. I always thought that was a unique characteristic of them, and I wondered what that means.
Yeah, I was going to say, Christine, you've been quiet. Do you think that fatalism, that kind of, it sounds almost like a fatalistic way of seeing things to me. Do you think that benefits them, or do you think that this could be causing harm in the long term?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say they're fatalistic. I would say they're very pragmatic. Mm-hmm. And I think the pragmatism lends to a certain amount of resilience. psychologically in them as a whole. So a lot of times I think, you'll see people who, different people respond to traumatic events in different ways. And some people are more resilient than others. Some people are able to experience a very traumatic event and go through what Miki explained, the fight, flight, or freeze response, and then move on, right? And go on and continue with survival. And other people are not able to do that easily. It's very difficult for them to overcome traumatic experiences. And I do have to wonder if part of the upbringing that a lot of the Emond's fielders experience and just the general pragmatism of everybody in that community sort of lends itself to more resilience and makes it easier for the kids once they go off and they go through all this bullshit, right? If that's part of what enables them to keep going, right? Because they all know that hard things happen and you can either lay down and die or you can just keep moving forward because the world's not going to stop. And that seems to be the approach that they take.
And to that point, Red and Black Dog says, let go and let God is a common phrase for working lower class African American families who have experienced generations of trauma and systematic disenfranchisement. Welcome, Red and Black Dog. New name, please.
Nice to see you.
Come back soon.
Mm-hmm. I had a follow-up question, and Red and Black Dog just got me from that. Oh, I remember it now. One of the things that I'm hearing in this, and I wonder, is do you think having that close-knit community helps support them through that pragmatism? Because I wonder, if I tried to be like that on my own, I'd probably fall apart quite quickly. But I feel like having that Emmons Field community, they're tight-knit, they're closely related, do you think that supports them and enables that pragmatism? Sorry, excuse me.
I do. I very much do. Yeah.
It's a very shared. I'm sorry. It's a very shared experience. They have very limited experiences except for what they share, and the stories they tell each other. They don't have a lot of outside anything. So yeah, it seems like whether it turns out to be a pragmatism or turns out to be like a I don't know, a hatred of the Congers, it's gonna be there and it's gonna be solid because there's not much else going on for them. It's kind of how I see it.
Well, and I think too that's that piece that gets foreshadowed at the very beginning that comes back at the end of this was about all of them, right? And how important community is, how important friendship is, how important these connections are. Even if you're not always communicating with each other, just having that connection, that's where the strength is. That's I think essential to the book, but that I think it's essential to the human experience.
Okay. Well, I know one other thing we wanted to talk about today is, parenting. So, and I mean, we all know Tam is best dad. That is a fact. I will hear no argument on it. Anyone else is wrong. But I want to know, tell me about what these first 4 chapters set up in terms of the importance of parenting or what we find out about parenting and parental figures in the Wheel of Time.
Yeah, I think I think Tam definitely wins best dad. But I also think it's funny because we see Rand continue to collect dads throughout the series. So that's not original to me. I'm sure I heard that from somebody else.
Like Russian dolls, he picks one up. There's a new dad. Oh, there's a new dad. It's amazing.
And he's got his land dad, and he's got his Tom dad, and he's got his work dad, and he's got So, but it comes back to his first dad, right? And the importance of having that secure attachment figure, like someone who, when we feel lost in the world, we can go back to and feel safe again. And that's just so important. And we're talking about Tam. I'm trying to remember the other parents we get introduced to early in the book. And now
Egwene's parents, we meet them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think later in the book we meet Abel Cawthon, and it's interesting because Perrin doesn't live with his parents. Mm-hmm. He lives with the the Luhans. But I mean, can you guys tell me about that? Because, you know, we hear about how boarding school would be bad for kids, but tell me about the role that the Luhans play for Perrin.
Well, that's an apprenticeship, so I think that's a little bit different than a boarding school situation, because he's taken into that family to learn a trade. And it's a small town, so they all know each other anyway. So I would imagine that they've known Perrin probably his whole life and are invested in him emotionally.
But he seems to, like, in it, I mean, I do not have an encyclopedic memory, but I do kind of remember Perrin really only thinking about the Luhans, and not his own parents. And when they needed to leave the Two Rivers with Moraine and Lan, like, they had to, I guess, negotiate with the Luhans, right? They needed to, like, right? Am I correct? Like, Moraine and, like, how to go and, like, convince Matt parents and the Luhans to let the kids go. So what does that mean for Perrin's development? Like, Perrin seems always disattached and othered. He always feels othered, and himself being so strikingly large has put himself in that position of feeling othered. I never thought of it in connection to the fact that he's been, like, separated from his family for so long. But that's a really interesting point, Shelly. Good point. Good question.
I'm just throwing them all at you. But I mean, I think for those of us who aren't, gifted in the way you guys are, can you talk a little bit more about attachment and, like, what parental attachment does and what it is and how it plays out? This is partially for me as well, because I know it's a thing, just not sure exactly what it is and what it looks like.
Sure. The Cliff Notes would be that when we are young, and I'm saying this kind of hesitantly because you can develop types of attachment later in life as well. So, but we have important others in our life, and we learn to kind of anticipate the way the world will respond to us based on how those important others in our life respond to us. If we have important others in our life that we can't count on for whatever reason, we can develop something called avoidant attachment or anxious attachment. And so anxious attachment kind of shows up when someone may feel like people are going to leave all the time, right? They can't trust that someone will be there when they really need them to be there. And avoidant attachment is kind of similar. I can't trust that others are going to be there, but I'm just not even going to count on you. I'm going to keep you at arm's length and be like, yeah, so you're back. That's cool. Whatever. I don't really care. Healthy attachment, what we're hoping for, what we all strive for in life, right, is that we have those important others in our life that we can kind of keep in our mind as we go wander around in the world. And if you think about a little toddler, a securely attached toddler will have a parent figure that maybe leaves the room and they get upset and they're frustrated by that, but then they settle down. And then when the parent comes back, they're comforted. They're like, oh, okay, you're back in the world. That's wonderful. And I think we've all experienced that to some degree or another with other people in our lives. As adults, we experience that. Are you going to be there when I need you? Can I trust you with, my own vulnerabilities? And that's our attachment to other people.
All right, so let's play Diagnose This. What attachment style does our three boys have? I'll go
make
first.
Up games as we go.
I'll go first. Rand is secure. Matt is anxious and anxious avoidant, and Perrin is ambivalent. You go.
Well, I think Rand's changes throughout the books.
Mm-hmm.
He is avoidantly attached, strong, like deeply so, like in the mid books, right? When we see him hard Rand, right? I gotta be hard. That's I'm not going to connect with anybody. I can't trust anybody to be there for me. I can't be there for anybody else. I think that's actually a really great example of that. And it breaks when Tam
is brought back into his life, and then he pushes him away, because that's what avoidantly attached folks do at times, is they will push away. And then he comes back to realize, oh, Tam was there for me all along. Like home was there for me all along. And so he kind of gets back to being securely attached, which is actually kind of a nice example of how that happens in real life too. Like,
yeah, I mean, I just said in chat, he's so secure he has 3 wives. Like he just like.
Is that what we're calling it?
He's attaching.
I'm sure that's an example of attachment theory, but
he's attaching securely all over the place, like a barnacle.
Attach here, attach here, attach here.
Oh my goodness. I feel like that's a really tricky question because they are still developing and they go through so much that I do think their attachment styles change throughout the course of the books. Like, so I don't even know that I would go so far as to attach a specific, see what I did there? Attach a specific attachment style to any of them because I don't know that their behavior is necessarily indicative of how they're attached. I think it's more them responding to their environment and responding to events as they unfold. I do think that Rand was securely attached for sure in the beginning, and I think that's part of what makes him so resilient as the books go on. And I think that that's actually true for Matt and Perrin too, because they have this foundational understanding that they are loved and that they do matter and that they are contributing members of a group and of a society, and they all end up in these leadership positions. And I don't think that that would really be possible at that age if they didn't have a firm foundation of feeling loved and attached and cared for when they were children growing up.
Mm-hmm. Which is another good point, coming back to the Luhans. With Perrin, one of the really important things to point out in attachment theory, right, is that it doesn't have to be a biological parent, right? We just need a person in our life who we learn to trust that they can be there. And I think the Luhans are definitely that for Perrin. And I don't know what his other family experience is. I've made up like fan fiction in my head about, because his reaction when he goes home and finds out about what's happened to them is real and heartfelt and stuff. But I also kind of wonder if there was like he was distant from them too.
What about Nynaeve and Egwene? Do you think there's an attachment happening there?
How do you mean? So
is Nynaeve playing a secure adult? Say their relationship persisted, do you think Nynaeve could have affected Egwene's attachment style?
Real quick, before we answer this, I'm coming from an understanding that your attachment style is from like your original like attachments from baby, right? Like I feel like my understanding is that attachment style is what you're kind of like inherit from like just being a pre-verbal being with parents, and then you carry that with you forever, and that's what you kind of deal with, and you can overcome them and you can become like more adept at handling situations. But I always thought like your attachment style is like you're kind of, when shit goes down and shit gets stressful, you're going back to your like earliest experiences. So when we're talking about like different relationships growing, I think we could talk about those attachments as being real, but I don't know if like I think we're still, help me out here, guys. What do you think?
No, I think, yes, I agree with you. I think that the attachment style that's formed in early childhood, when you have all these little neural pathways that are forming and all this synaptic pruning and all the things that go on that shape the way that you behave cognitively, right? The way that your cognition functions, the way that you respond to situations before you are able to reason through those situations. That's your attachment style. I do think forming emotional attachments with people can be influenced by your attachment style, but they're not necessarily. What, Miki? What?
I'm sorry, I just read Ryan's comment on the.
I'm like, is what I'm saying funny?
No, I apologize. It's Ryan. No, what you're saying is. I am also going to add too. That's the early
I'm missing names. All of a sudden, you know how this happens, right? I want to say Bilby, and that is not right.
Bowlby.
Right? Yeah, the early Bowlby theory, attachment theory, like early attachment theory, very much early childhood experiences. Some, I think, of the more recent research that's coming out looking at attachment theory or internal family system stuff says that while our early attachments are key, they can change over time, and important relationships later in our life can adjust those general attachment styles.
Yes, but isn't that somewhat dependent on the amount of neuroplasticity you have in your brain when you try to reapproach those attachment styles? Because as you get older and you have less neuroplasticity, isn't it more difficult to sort of rewire your brain and your attachment styles?
Well, isn't that when attachment style becomes personality disorders?
Well, I mean,
that's a whole nother episode.
How long do you want to talk?
We were wondering if we're going to talk about Luz Theron in this.
Yes.
For the non-psychologists in the room, can you define neuroplasticity, please?
So neuroplasticity, so your brain's, I guess the easiest way to think about this is when your brain is very young and supple, it is more malleable to a degree, right? It's not as, it's sort of like how your joints wear out over time. And when you're younger, they're young and they're supple, and there are things that you can do to help maintain the health of your joints, but they are going to deteriorate over time. It's sort of the same with your brain. I am not a neurologist, so this is not going to be a super precise explanation. But basically, over time, your brain, it becomes more difficult to relearn certain habits, right? And certain ways of thinking and the way that you respond to things, because it's just, you're not as flexible. Your brain isn't as flexible. Did any of that make any sense?
It did.
Yeah. So a child pre-puberty can learn, that's when language acquisition is strong, music, certain skills are strong. And then puberty hits and you lose just like a gazillion brain cells, the flush, the rush of hormones that happens. Like you need to, your brain becomes more like who you are.
I'd say the cells are reallocated. I don't know that you necessarily lose them.
I think you lose them. They're just they unionize and they go off and they start throwing businesses.
They secede.
I was going to say they might just march to other parts of the body.
That's what I'm saying.
Basically, we become fucking dumber, and then but neuroplasticity. I do believe that people's attitude affects their own neuroplasticity, for sure, and people's practices can affect their long-term mental flexibility, for sure.
Right. What do you think, Miki? Want to bring it on home?
Bring it on home.
No, I mean, I think you guys hit it. Is I think other things will impact your neuroplasticity as well. So we'll go back to trauma. A brain that is experienced or has experienced trauma is not going to allocate resources to build new neural pathways, because that doesn't make sense from a resource standpoint. So, so we want to make sure that I'm distracted by reading the comments again.
I know, me too.
We need to address this. Red and black dog, your brain is not a muscle. Let's just move on. No. So doing the your brain does not want to do the same thing over and over again. It just fucking atrophies and dies. So.
Well, that's where synaptic learning comes in.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
although he is pointing out a statement of that neurons that fire together wire together, which is a phrase that we do use a lot, which is so thought patterns that you have more frequently are just easier for your brain to think again.
Yes.
And so when we come back to that attachment piece, early attachment, especially if it's early attachment you have with a significant other or significant person, that lasts for quite a long time, that's a lot of neural firing that is just creating pattern that you build up over time.
Right. It's sort of like water following the path of least resistance. Your thoughts work in a very similar way. So if you want to think of those neural pathways as riverbeds, right? And so riverbeds, like something like the Mississippi or the Nile, something that's been around for a very long time, you've got a very set pattern. It's going to go the way that it goes, right? And good luck trying to stop it or redirect it. That's a major process that takes place. And so that's where something like cognitive behavioral therapy comes in. That's something a lot of people have probably heard of. And it's trying to, I don't know, for lack of a better term, form new estuaries, right? Or make little dams, or just sort of redirect the flow of that water that's been flowing in the same direction for such a long time. But it's, doing that with your brain.
Yeah, and with therapy, you're doing that intentionally, but in life, there's life events that can do that, right? That can kind of create new ways of thinking. And I think that's part of what we see going on. And I want to bring it back to your question, Shelly, that you asked earlier, because we've left Egwene and Nynaeve out of this, and I'm feeling badly because they're two of my favorite characters. Yeah. And one of the things I love about Egwene is we talk about neuroplasticity. Boy, Egwene wants to try everything and is open to all these new experiences. And you see like her growth that she experiences from that. She's willing to, like create all the estuaries, right? Let's just redirect and like build canals and stuff.
But don't you think that also goes back to her attachment style? So she was probably very securely attached to both of her parents. They probably taught her how to.
Oh no, Christine froze.
Did I freeze? Am I here?
Freeze.
Am I back?
You're back.
Try again.
Okay, what's the last thing I said?
They taught her how to.
They taught her how to succeed in an age-appropriate way through various stages in her development. And so that is what made her a great self-starter. It's what gave her the confidence to try new things because, well, why wouldn't I? I know how to do things and be successful at it. No big deal if I fail. It'll be fine, but I probably won't. So I think that really speaks to her parents and the way that they brought her up.
Strong mother. We know that.
But not an overbearing mother.
We never see them interacting ever, really, do we?
Not really. We see her mother interacting with Rand.
Yeah, think about it.
Everyone loves her.
Think about it. The only parent dynamics we ever see is Tam and Rand. Think about it.
Yeah, everything else we hear is secondhand.
That's crazy. Oh my god. Okay.
And they don't even really think about their parents. Like, there's a point where Egwene's like, "Oh yeah, I wrote home," and then other people are like, "Oh, I should have probably written a letter." But so we know Egwene's communicating with her parents, but that's
now. Did Nynaeve's mother die? Because we hear a lot about her father, but we don't hear much about her mother.
I think so. That was sort of the assumption that I made.
All right, everyone, just in who's listening, we have resources in the description of the video. If you are triggered by anything we're talking about, we are touching upon some strong subjects, mothers dying, Ewan Finger is getting hit. If you're getting, if you have any strong situation going on in your life, please look at the resources we have and don't be afraid to reach out for help. Continue, guys.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not to diagnose Nynaeve with very little information, but what would possibly experiencing her mother's death at a young age, would that influence some of the behavior patterns that we see in her?
Yeah, because we don't hear much about her family either, but if she was put into a parental role, if she became kind of a parentified child where she had to, she does talk about caring for the rest of the Emond's Field 5, changing their diapers, swaddling and stuff like that. But if she also had to do that within her family, then that would have shifted kind of her view on the world and seeing herself as having to be, the strong one. That, again, there might be kind of that avoidant attachment in there because not because she doesn't want to care for other people, but she may have built this belief system up that she's the one who has to care for them. And that's what Lan comes in and kind of breaks that wall down. But he does it because he's also avoidantly attached, right? Like, he's not going to get too close too fast to her, and she's got to chase him down just a little bit.
She does, but I also think part of part of the way that she's trying to mother everyone is a reflection of the way that she wants to be cared for and mothered. And I think you see that a lot of times with people who have been in a position where they have to take care of everybody else and they don't feel like they can depend on other people to take care of them, even though that's what they want, but they don't know how to let that happen. And you see that with Nynaeve and with Lan, where they both don't know how to let someone else take care of them, even though desperately that's what they need and what they desire.
I'm so glad you talked about Lan, because I mean, I know Lan is one of my favorite characters, so I just can't not ask this, but like his story is traumatic. And from birth, it's like, you know, the joke about Canadians being born with a hockey stick in his hand, he was born with a sword in his hand. Yeah. Like, what is that?
A heron mark sword in his hand.
I know.
The pressure.
What does that do to a kid? That kind of pressure from birth?
He cut his own umbilical cord off. He was born. He said, "Give me it." Boom! Cut the umbilical cord, and said, and like they tried to give him like stuffed animals, and he's like, "Nope." I'm sorry. I love Lan. And real quick question: if they change Lan to Lon, is it going to be Lon and then Lon Fear, or is it going to be Lan Fear? I'll be so pissed.
We say man, we say hand, we say can.
Yeah,
it's Lan.
I know.
Lan.
I fear it's going to be Lon, but then I fear it's going to be Lan Fear, which is like, no, come on, please. If it's Lon Fear and Lon, I'll be happy. I'll be like, at least it's consistent.
If they're speaking with British accents, I could forgive Lon and Lon Fear.
Mm-hmm. There's so many other things I want the show to do well, including, mental health. Like, that's one of the questions I have is, a lot of Robert Jordan's writing is, what we knew at the time, and his personal trauma responses. Do you think the show is going to update that? Like, do you think the show is going to try and be more knowledgeable about what we know about trauma now?
I do.
Yes, and maybe to its detriment. I don't know. Like, there's a certain kind of you do need to get the I go back to what I was like saying. Like, if like Robert Jordan's like decision making tree is like, we gotta like get into this or move the story forward. So I don't know how. Like, I think that great acting will get into this without a lot of exposition. Mm-hmm. It'll just come out through the acting, and that's what I'm really hoping for. And great dialogue and great acting will just convey the development from like scared boy, scared little girl to like fully grown, developed males, men and women who are like handling their business. I hope that's just the acting will carry that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, another character we meet in the Two Rivers is Tom. And, can you guys talk about the parental role that he plays for the boys?
Great question.
Did you have a thought behind that, right?
I'm just curious.
Myself, and I have so many thoughts. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, very quickly, he takes on the role. He sees what happened to his nephew or cousin, and he sees like, I think the entire reason he jumped from the loft down into the Emond Field 5 and said, "I'm coming too," was this impulse to save them. He felt love for them. He identified with them from his life experience. He had a strong, like, fatherly, like, almost savior complex with them. Unwittingly, knowing, like, I mean, if he actually succeeded in what he wanted to do, he would have separated from the boys from Moraine. They would have never been able to fulfill their destiny. He would have fucking destroyed the world. But he had like the right intentions, right? He really wanted to help them out. He really wanted to get them away from Moraine, and I think he like was trying to like lead them, in that direction from a very like strong, like almost parental figure, parental kind of like starting point.
Yeah, but I think he's a nice example of how our lived experience can really color our perception of events.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Because of what happened to Owen, he sees what's about to happen to these kids in like one way. And I don't know that it takes a while for him to open up to see a potentially different story unfolding for these kids.
Yeah.
This, just real quick, this is a good point. Glenn says that Tom seems more parental for Matt and Elaine, not as much Rand, in my opinion. I guess I'm more thinking we are starting from book one, and we're really focused on this. There's a lot that's going on with Tom, and especially with Tom and Elaine, and those weird dynamics where she's like flirting with him all the time, and like these weird like there's this weird shit that goes on with Elaine and Tom. So I think we're kind of just more focusing on the earlier books and those dynamics for sure.
No, go ahead, Christine.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think I see him more as like an uncle. His role is more of like an uncle type role than a parental role. And I do think that what Miki said is completely accurate. His handling of this situation is heavily influenced by his own desire to save his nephew, who he couldn't save. And so I think sometimes, like when we're rushing into a situation where we're trying to help someone, it's beneficial to step back and ask what the motivation is. Are we doing this really for them, or are we really doing this because we're trying to save ourselves or save somebody that we couldn't save in the past? And in my opinion, Tom very much fits that profile.
Oh no, yeah, no, yeah. And there's you can get in a rabbit hole where you like see all altruism as just self-serving, like ways to like reframe your own self-image. But yes, to that effect, though, yeah, like Tom was very much like, I felt driven to rewrite his own history and create more meaning in his life. He was very much like floundering around before this all happened. And then
I think this theme of theme of guilt as a motivator comes up very early on. I think I saw that in the chat where Tom is reacting to his own guilt and not necessarily the needs of the boys. And I like Miki and Christine that you say that this could have played out really badly for not knowing that. I think I see some of this commonality with Perrin as well, where guilt has affected how he acts because I think he hurt kids younger on. Do you want to talk a little bit just about, Perrin's trajectory because of his, reactions to guilt that he may or may not have to feel?
Yeah, Perrin's got that strong protector kind of bend to him, and we hear him kind of think through this idea, and other people describe him this way too, of like he wants to be careful so as to not hurt people. But I think what ends up happening for him, similar to Tom, is there's an assumption that is not always correct. Like I think there are times where Perrin assumes that he is hurting people or could hurt people in ways that he actually hasn't. He's not responsible for the pains that they're feeling. And I think we get that way later in the books too, when he starts reacting to smell instead of letting people speak for themselves. And he interprets, his own responsibility in that and his actions. But again, that's so human. I think that's one of the ways that this book is written in a way that I think that is very relatable, is we all are guilty of that at times, where we can, think too much of our role in a situation and put ourselves kind of central in the events that are happening, when sometimes we are kind of to the side of the events. And I'm saying that it's not that Perrin thinks that he's, central to the events, but I think sometimes he thinks that he does cause way more harm than I think he does in the books. He needs to protect people from harm. Like the point, and again, I'm jumping ahead in the book, in the Eye of the World, but like the point where they're running away from the ravens and he's contemplating killing Egwene so that she doesn't have to suffer the same fate as the fox. And then the guilt that he holds for having that thought, and it just like that guilt eats at him for chapters at that point of like, oh, I thought about killing Egwene and like what a horrible person I am for having that thought. I think it's compounding, like one that he thinks he needs to be responsible and take, end her life for her. And then he's guilty that he had the thought in the first place.
There's a interesting dichotomy with Perrin where he is considered like the careful, considerate one, but then there's instances when like he's not. For instance, when Matt blows the horn and they're all like talking to Rand and they're like, well, you're the Dragon Reborn, like where's the banner? And like Perrin rips a stick off of a tree, says, give me the banner. Like, without question, Matt was like, what? Like, was sitting there dumbfounded, like, oh, it's you? What the? He had, like, sit there and, like, freak out. Parents like, nope, give me the band, let's ride. Like, it was, like, instinctive. There's this instinctive side of Perrin, and there's just, like, very considered, controlled, slow, plotting side of Perrin. I always thought it was interesting how he vacillates.
Christine, I think I cut you off earlier.
Did you?
I think I did.
I don't think, I mean... I don't remember that happening, but okay. I forgive you.
I was going to say, do you want to say anything about that with Perrin and the guilt as a motivator? I feel like this is a conversation you and I have almost had before about your outsized effect on things because of a trauma response.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like with Perrin, I would need to know more about his role as he was growing up. I don't really feel like I know enough about where he fit within his own family system, and then again, what his role was beyond being an apprentice with the Luhans. I wonder if his size plays into some of that too. Maybe at some point he was made very aware that he is so much bigger than other people that it's very easy for him to hurt them. And I wonder if that's something that he's sort of, just internalized, and he's always worried about hurting other people. I don't know. I guess I feel like I don't know enough about Perrin growing up to really understand where that comes from.
Yeah, he doesn't ever explicitly say like, oh my God, I'm always admonished for knocking this kid down or anything. It almost seems like it always emanates from his own like loving concern for the world.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's that point where that loving concern for the world can become suffocating for the people around you, because you become so, again, this is an example of being very self-focused, where he is very focused on his own feelings of guilt and less focused on what might actually be going on with the other person. So when he's smelling people's feelings are very complex. Emotions are very complex. And when we have a feeling, it doesn't necessarily mean that the thoughts that we have or the behaviors that we have after that are rooted in that feeling. So he makes so many assumptions that are based on his own feelings, right? And his own sense of guilt. And then he just sort of projects that on the people around him, which again, I don't know if that's just a lack of maturity or if it has something to do with the way that he was raised.
Well, I'm going to go back to Leah's question earlier that, could he have been demonized because of his size? And I think it might be the opposite. I think he and Nynaeve may have a similarity there. If he was very large as a child, adults may have unintentionally treated him as older than he actually was and parentified him. And that's where he was given the message of, you need to take care of these other little ones because they're smaller than you.
Yeah, maybe.
And so I think like Nynaeve, he sees or believes that he needs to care for people that maybe he doesn't actually need, that don't need his particular care at that moment.
Yeah.
Well,
Like
I know, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, like Kevin said, it would be a very confusing thing to be constantly aware of other people's feelings.
Yeah.
You should know what it's like to be me.
I'm confused by my own feelings most of the time.
That sounds like work to me.
Yeah.
I'm a male into it, and it sucks.
So I know we have we said we wanted to go for about 90 minutes. And I think at this point, we wanted to move on and kind of talk about, like, tie a bow on today. So maybe I'll go around the circle and start with Ryan and just say, what are kind of your thoughts and reflections coming out of this conversation?
First off, I've had a great time. I was so nervous for how this was going to go, and it seems like people are enjoying themselves. So this is very edifying. To put a bow on this, I think that we all see that this turning of the wheel that Robert Jordan's describing is not the best turning of the wheel. And we'll get into it more and more and more, that all the systems that are being developed, all the like the way the cultures are developing are unfortunate in a lot of ways. And I don't believe that when we're talking about the Age of Legends and what have you, it seems like they were able to like handle shit differently, and they probably had like emotional IQs that were like bing, like more than we can even imagine, like alien level emotional IQs. And I think that if we were to, we're analyzing the world that Robert Jordan invented, and I think that we're not getting into it with like rose-colored glasses. I think there's a lot of like loophole. There's a lot of holes, and I think that it's good to look at it in this lens, because it's not an ideal world. It's and I think like when I look at our world now, I feel like we're somewhere in between Robert Jordan's age and the Age of Legends. We're like a little bit better than them, but we're not nowhere near that where we could be. And I just wonder, I think this show is just a little like, trying to get towards the Age of Legends.
Christine.
Yeah, I also had a really good time. I think it's been really fun talking about the series in a way that I haven't talked about with other people. I mean, I've been around in the community for several years, and I feel like I've had the same conversations about the same characters over and over and over again. And so it's been really fun for me to be able to delve into things like attachment theory and, like neural pathways and like all that kind of stuff. That's actually really fun. And so I really enjoyed it. And now like the wheels are turning in my brain, and I'm going through and I'm thinking of all the different characters and whether or not they were securely attached and how that's going to influence, what we see them doing later down the road in the different books and whatnot. And I love it. I love it because it's a way for me to relive this series that I love in a fresh way. So I feel like this show is a gift in that way, because it's sort of reawakening my excitement for the Wheel of Time. And you guys are cool too.
Yeah. I'm just here for the popcorn.
Yeah.
Miki, what did you think?
There's popcorn? No, I'm gonna sound like an echo. This is just fun. Like, I have had so much fun geeking out with you all. I geek out about the Wheel of Time in one part of my life. I geek out about psychology in another part of my life. And it's just really fucking cool to bring them together and have people to chat with it about. And then what makes it even cooler, because we would have this conversation anyways, is then like I kept getting distracted by chat, because it's really cool to watch you all like engaging as well and being part of this and adding to the conversation. And I am excited. I think my intention coming in today was, I think in general, I try to bring light to the world where I can. So, if there are places where people are experiencing darker moments, then I hope to bring some light and balance there. And that was my hope today. And I don't know what other people's experience is, because it's your own. You have your own experience, but I know my experience is I feel lighter. I had a really fun time and really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And how about you, Shelly? Put your bow on this.
Put my bow on this.
What's your takeaway?
My bow on this is it's been wonderful. I just want to keep talking to you guys forever, but eventually I'm going to have to go use the washroom. Biology always talks in the end. But no, it's been really awesome watching. I love hearing people talk about things that they're passionate about. And it's, I talking about mental health is a privilege that we really have. And, being in a position to be able to shepherd people through conversations about mental health that hopefully they find helpful is really quite an honor. So I just really want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to, be a bit of a shepherd tonight, or a sheep herder, if you will.
Aw, sheep herder.
Nicely done.
A sheep herder-S.
Mm-hmm.
We loved having you, Shelly. I mean, when we were trying to decide who should we have as our first guest host, it was unanimous. We all wanted you to be on. You are articulate. Here's a heart for you too. You're Canadian. I mean, you're my Wolfkin sister. You're such a wonderful person, and you are very you're just so intuitive, and you pick up on so many nuanced parts of everything that other people I think don't notice, and you're very thoughtful, and I'm really glad that you were able to join us today, so thank you.
Well, if you'll excuse me, I only have 4 feet of space, so there's not going to be room in this space for my ego and you guys if we keep this going. So I think now I'm gonna toss it back to Ryan, who is kind of my shepherd at the beginning, and say about what's coming next.
Yes, so we, as a tradition that we're starting today, we're going to end every show with a guided meditation led by Miki. And so everyone, if you don't want to do the guided meditation, feel free to just jump out and meet us on Discord afterwards. We're going to take a little break and then jump into Discord and chat with you all. And I'd love to continue the conversation. So, Miki, are you ready? And my question to you is, do you want to continue the music or do you want silence?
Oh, music would be lovely in the background.
All right, do you want me to?
It's perfect.
Okay, beautiful. Then we are going to let everyone mute our mics. And here we go.
Right. So I'd like everyone to start by taking a deep breath in. Feel the breath filling your lungs. And take a breath out. I want you to picture in your mind a single candle flame. Other events will continue to happen. There will be other sounds, other sensations, but the flame is your focus. Be aware of other events as they occur. The air on your skin, the feeling of yourself sitting, standing, laying wherever you are. As distractions occur, bring your attention back to the flame. The flame is your focus. In your next breath in, allow your attention to shift down to your feet, becoming aware that they are feeling warm and heavy. Your legs are becoming warm and heavy. Your core and chest are warm and heavy. Your shoulders, arms, neck, and head feel strong, warm, and heavy. Bring the image of the flame to the center of your mind. Thoughts will arise because they do. Allow the flame to consume them. They are no more than just motes of dust. A thought comes and it slides into the flame. Emotions arise. We do not push them away. We notice the emotions as they come. They too drift into the flame. There is no force needed. We just allow them into the flame. Allow yourself to drift in the space between. The space between thoughts, the space between sensations, the space between emotion. As distractions arise and you feel yourself pulled from the space between, bring your focus back to the flame. Allow the distraction to slide into the flame and yourself to be in the void between. Throughout this time, all things have continued. There are still noises outside, sensation, and thoughts and feelings. You can be aware of any of these, allowing your attention to rest on them, and then bringing your attention back to the flame. As we come to the end of our time together this evening, I want you to expand your awareness out, past the flame, becoming aware of the sound of my voice, the sounds around you, the sensation of the air on your skin, gravity holding you, whether you're sitting or lying or standing. Bringing your awareness back now to this moment, feeling focused, warm, and ready to move forward. Thank you all and have a wonderful